At my sister's funeral, my husband held me and whispered, "She was the love of my life. Even gave me a son, something you never could." I stood there frozen. He had no idea I'd read their messages months ago. I just smiled, walked away, and started planning. I buried my sister that day. His turn would come soon enough. I felt his lips brush against my ear as we stood beside Mia's grave. Everyone around us was crying, but Patrick wasn't. His voice was calm, almost satisfied. "She was the love of my life. Even gave me a son, something you never could." My breath stopped. The funeral service continued around us, but I couldn't hear anything except those words echoing in my head. Patrick's arm tightened around my waist, and to everyone watching, we looked like a grieving couple supporting each other through loss. But I knew better now. I stared down at the wooden casket holding my sister's body. Mia was gone. She'd fought cancer for 8 months, and I'd been there through every treatment, every sleepless night, every moment of pain. I'd held her hand when the doctors delivered bad news. I'd watched her waste away until she was barely recognizable. And apparently I'd watched my husband fall in love with her. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories of strength and truth. If you believe that women deserve justice and the courage to reclaim their power, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this. Now let's see how this unfolds. Little Gabriel was crying somewhere behind us. 18 months old, and he'd never see his mother again. Daniel bounced him gently, trying to calm him down. Poor Daniel. He thought he was Gabriel's father. He'd been taking care of Mia during her illness, helping with the baby, acting like a devoted partner. He had no idea he was raising another man's child. My husband's child. "I know this is hard," Patrick whispered, his performance perfect for anyone listening. "But I'm here for you." The irony made my stomach turn. He was here for me. After confessing he loved my dead sister. After admitting he'd fathered her child while I spent 5 years begging God for a baby of my own. I remembered the phone calls now. Late-night conversations Patrick claimed were about work. The way he'd started volunteering to run errands for Mia when she got pregnant. How he knew exactly which brand of diapers Gabriel preferred, which songs made him sleep. I thought he was being helpful. A good brother-in-law. "Casey." Patrick's voice pulled me back to the cemetery. "You're shaking." I was. My whole body was trembling, but not from grief anymore. Something else was building inside me. Something cold and calculating that I didn't recognize. "I'm fine," I managed to say. But I wasn't fine. I was remembering things. Like the text message I'd seen on Patrick's phone 3 months ago. Mia's name on the screen with words that made my heart race. "I can't wait to see you tonight." When I'd asked Patrick about it, he'd laughed. "She's lonely, Casey. Scared about being a single mom. I'm just being supportive." I'd believed him. I'd actually felt guilty for questioning it. Now I wondered how many other lies I'd swallowed without question. The pastor finished speaking. People started moving toward their cars, but I couldn't make my feet work. Gabriel's crying had stopped. When I turned around, I saw him nestled against Daniel's chest, sucking his thumb. Daniel's eyes were red with tears. He loved that baby. Really loved him. "We should go," Patrick said. "People will be coming to the house." The house. Mia's house, where she'd spent her final months. Where I'd cooked her meals and helped her bathe and read stories to Gabriel while she rested. Where Patrick had apparently been playing house with my sister while I worked late shifts at the hospital. "Yes," I said quietly. "Let's go." As we walked to the car, I caught Daniel's eye. He looked lost, like a man who'd just buried his whole world. I wanted to warn him somehow. Tell him that everything he thought he knew was wrong. But what could I say? That my husband was probably Gabriel's real father? That my sister had been living a lie? "Take care of Gabriel," I said instead, touching Daniel's arm gently. He nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Always." The drive home was torture. Patrick talked about the service, about how beautiful Mia had looked, about how many people had come to pay their respects. His voice was steady, normal. Like he hadn't just confessed to having an affair with my dying sister. I made appropriate sounds of agreement while my mind raced. When had it started? How long had they been together? Did Mia love him back, or was she just lonely and scared like Patrick claimed? The worst part was not knowing if my sister had been a victim or a willing participant in destroying my marriage. We pulled into our driveway and I stared at the house we'd bought together. The house where we'd planned to raise our own children someday. The house where I'd cried over negative pregnancy tests while Patrick held me and promised everything would be okay. Had he been thinking of Mia during those moments? Comparing my broken body to her fertile one? Ready to face everyone? Patrick asked, turning off the engine. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man I'd married 7 years ago. The man I'd trusted with my heart, my future, my dreams of motherhood. The man who'd just admitted to fathering a child with my sister while I remained heartbroken and empty. He had no idea that I'd seen those text messages months ago. No idea that I'd been suspicious but too afraid to dig deeper. No idea that his whispered confession had just confirmed my worst fears and lit something dark inside me. Ready, I said and smiled. As I was ready. Not for the reception or the casseroles or the well-meaning condolences from family friends. I was ready for something else entirely. Patrick thought his secret was safe. He thought he could whisper his truth at my sister's grave and I'd be too shocked, too grief-stricken to process it. He was wrong. As we walked toward the house, I began planning. Not the wild schemes of a heartbroken woman, but the careful, methodical planning of someone who'd learned patience from 5 years of disappointment. Patrick had taken my sister. He thought he'd taken my peace. Now I was going to take everything from him. The house felt different when we got home from the cemetery. Filled with Mia's friends and co-workers, all speaking in hushed tones and offering sympathy casseroles. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, accepting hugs and murmured condolences while my mind worked on a completely different level. Gabriel was there too, still with Daniel. The man looked exhausted, probably hadn't slept properly in weeks. I watched Patrick approach them, saw how his eyes lingered on the baby with something that looked almost possessive. When Gabriel reached tiny arms toward Patrick, I felt sick. "He remembers you," Daniel said gratefully. "Thank you for helping so much these past months." Patrick's smile was warm, practiced. Of course. Mia was family. Family. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. After everyone left, I helped clean up while Patrick put leftover food in the refrigerator. Normal domestic tasks that felt surreal after what I'd learned. When he suggested we stay the night at Mia's house instead of driving home, I agreed. Someone needed to start going through her belongings, he said. It would be easier to start tomorrow morning. I knew he had other reasons for wanting to stay. That night, I lay awake listening to Patrick's steady breathing beside me in Mia's guest room. The same room where he'd probably spent countless nights while I worked late shifts at the hospital. The same bed where my sister had made decisions that destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. When morning came, Patrick left early to handle some urgent work matter. I waited until his car disappeared around the corner, then I got to work. Mia's bathroom still smelled like her lavender shampoo. Her toothbrush sat in the holder next to a smaller one that must have been Gabriel's. I carefully wrapped both in tissue paper and placed them in separate plastic bags. From her dresser, I collected strands of dark hair from her old brush. Each item went into labeled bags with dates and times written in my neat handwriting. The hardest part was getting Patrick's DNA sample. When he came home that evening, I waited until he showered. His razor sat on the bathroom counter, still damp. I wrapped it carefully in a clean towel and added it to my collection. 3 days later, I drove 2 towns over to a private lab. The technician was professional and discreet. No questions asked beyond the necessary paperwork. I paid in cash and gave a fake name. The results would be ready in a week. Playing the perfect wife became my full-time performance. I cooked Patrick's favorite meals and listened to his stories about work. When he talked about missing Mia, I held his hand and offered comfort. When he mentioned how hard it must be for Daniel to raise Gabriel alone, I suggested we should offer more help. Maybe we could babysit sometimes, I said over dinner. Give Daniel a break. Patrick's fork paused halfway to his mouth. That's thoughtful of you. But Daniel seems to have things handled. Still, Gabriel is practically family. And children need stability during times like this. Something flickered across Patrick's face. Interest. Calculation. You're right. We should definitely stay involved in his life. Every conversation felt like a chess match now. Patrick thought he was playing against a grieving woman who suspected nothing. He had no idea I was already 3 moves ahead. While waiting for the DNA results, I decided to visit Mia's lawyer. Robert Chin had handled our family's legal matters for years. I made an appointment under the pretense of settling Mia's affairs. I'm trying to organize everything for Gabriel's future, I explained, sitting across from his mahogany desk. I want to make sure I understand what my sister left behind. Robert pulled out a thick file. Mia was very thorough with her estate planning, especially after Gabriel was born. He walked me through everything. The house was paid off and would go to Gabriel when he turned 18. There was a substantial life insurance policy. But the surprise was the family trust. Your grandmother's land holdings, Robert explained. Mia inherited them when your parents died. Very valuable property now with all the development happening in that area. It's all tied up in a trust for Gabriel. My stomach dropped. How valuable? Conservative estimate? Around $2 million. Could be more in a few years. $2 million. No wonder Patrick had been so interested in helping with Gabriel. No wonder he'd whispered those words at the funeral. This wasn't just about love or betrayal. This was about money. What happens if something were to occur to Daniel? I asked carefully. Robert adjusted his glasses. Well, Daniel isn't listed as Gabriel's legal father on any documents. Mia never established paternity officially. So if something happened to him, the court would need to determine Gabriel's next legal guardian. And who would that be? Family members would have the strongest claim. You, for instance, as Gabriel's aunt. Or, he paused, checking his notes. Anyone who could prove biological relation to the child. I left Robert's office with my hands shaking. The pieces were falling into place and the picture they formed was uglier than I'd imagined. Patrick hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He'd calculated the whole thing. Found a way to access millions of dollars through a child he believed was his son. The DNA results arrived on a Wednesday. Patrick was upstairs giving Gabriel a bath while Daniel ran errands. I sat at Mia's kitchen table and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The scientific language was complex, but the conclusion was clear. Patrick was not Gabriel's biological father. Not even close. I read the results 3 times before the implications sank in. Patrick had been so certain. So confident in his whispered confession at the cemetery. But he was wrong. Which meant everything else might be wrong too. I thought about Daniel's devotion to Gabriel. The way he held the baby like his own flesh and blood. The grief in his eyes at the funeral. What if Daniel really was Gabriel's father? What if Mia had lied to Patrick, let him believe Gabriel was his while protecting the real father? My sister was more cunning than I'd given her credit for. I folded the DNA results carefully and tucked them into my purse. Upstairs, I could hear Patrick's voice as he read Gabriel a bedtime story. The same gentle tone he'd used with me during our years of trying to conceive. The same voice that had whispered poison at my sister's grave. When Patrick came downstairs, I was washing dishes at the sink. He's finally asleep, Patrick said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Daniel should be back soon. I leaned against him, playing my part. He's lucky to have you helping so much. Gabriel needs stability. Male figures in his life. Patrick's voice carried that possessive tone again. I've been thinking we should petition for partial custody. Help Daniel with the financial burden. There was. His real plan laid bare. That's very generous, I said softly. Patrick kissed my neck. I just want what's best for the boy. I smiled, still facing away so he couldn't see my expression. As now I knew the truth. Patrick wasn't Gabriel's father. His entire scheme was built on a lie. And I was the only person in the world who knew it. The question was, what was I going to do with that knowledge? For 2 weeks I carried the DNA results like a loaded weapon. Every morning when Patrick kissed me goodbye, every evening when he asked about my day, every night when he held me close in bed, I felt those papers burning in my purse. The truth was mine now and I was going to choose exactly when and how to use it. Daniel had been coming by more often since the funeral. Sweet, grieving Daniel who had no idea he was Gabriel's real father. I watched him during those visits, studied the way his face lit up when Gabriel laughed, how naturally he soothed the toddler's tears. Love radiated from every gesture, every word. Meanwhile, Patrick continued his performance as the caring family friend. He brought expensive toys for Gabriel, talked about college funds and future planning. Each act of fake generosity made my stomach turn. Daniel seems overwhelmed, Patrick mentioned one evening as we drove home. Maybe we should offer to take Gabriel for weekends. Give him some space to grieve properly. Kept my voice level. That's thoughtful of you. The boy needs stability. Structure. Patrick's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I've been thinking about what Mia would have wanted. What Mia would have wanted. The irony was breathtaking. That night I made my decision. I was going to tell Daniel the truth, but I needed to be careful. This wasn't just about revealing Patrick's lies anymore. This was about giving a father his son back. I called Daniel the next morning while Patrick was at work. My hands shook as I dialed his number. Daniel, it's Casey. Could we meet for coffee? There's something important I need to discuss with you. He sounded surprised but agreed. We met at a small cafe 2 towns over, far from anyone who might recognize us. Daniel looked tired, older than his 35 years. Grief had carved new lines around his eyes. Is everything okay? He asked, settling into the booth across from me. I pulled the DNA results from my purse and placed them on the table between us. I need to show you something. But first, I need you to tell me about your relationship with Mia. Daniel's face went red. We weren't. She was sick and I was just helping. Daniel. I reached across and touched his hand. I'm not judging you. I need to know the truth. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his coffee cup. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I loved her. I know that sounds terrible, with her being married to someone else's memory and sick and everything, but I couldn't help it. She was so brave, so strong even while she was dying. Tears started flowing down his cheeks. We were together for about 6 months before Gabriel was born. Then she got scared, said it was too complicated, that people would think she was just using me for help with the baby. My heart ached for him. Did she ever tell you who Gabriel's father was? She said it was someone from before, someone who couldn't be in the picture. I never pushed for details because it seemed to upset her. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. But I loved Gabriel from the moment I met him. It didn't matter to me who his biological father was. I pushed the DNA results toward him. It should matter to you now. Daniel's hands trembled as he read the report. I watched his face change as the words sank in. Confusion, then hope, then pure joy mixed with heartbreak. He's mine. Daniel whispered. He's yours. Daniel broke down then, sobbing right there in the coffee shop. Other customers stared, but I didn't care. I was watching a man discover he had a son, and it was beautiful and devastating at the same time. Why didn't she tell me? He asked when he could speak again. I thought about my sister, dying and scared and carrying so many secrets. Maybe she was protecting you. Or maybe she was protecting Gabriel. I don't know, Daniel. But what matters now is that you know. We talked for 2 more hours. I told him about Patrick's confession at the funeral, about the inheritance, about everything I'd discovered. Daniel listened with growing anger and disbelief. So he was planning to use Gabriel to access Mia's estate? That's exactly what he was planning. Daniel's jaw tightened. What do we do now? I'd been thinking about that question for days. Gabriel's 2nd birthday is next month. I think it's time everyone knew the truth. Planning Gabriel's birthday party became my new obsession. I spent hours creating the guest list, making sure every important person in our lives would be there. Patrick's business partners, our neighbors, family friends, even Pastor Williams, who had officiated Mia's funeral. Patrick was thrilled that I was taking charge of the celebration. You're amazing, Casey. Mia would be so proud of how you're stepping up for Gabriel. Every compliment felt like acid in my veins. I ordered custom invitations with Gabriel's baby photo on the front. Inside I wrote, "Join us as Gabriel turns 2. A celebration of truth, family, and new beginnings." Patrick never asked to see the final wording. The decorations were simple but elegant. Blue and white balloons, a train-themed cake, toys scattered around Mia's living room. Daniel helped with the setup, his hands shaking with nervous energy. "Are you sure about this?" he asked as we hung streamers. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The guests started arriving at 2 o'clock. Gabriel was in his best outfit, a little blue suit that made him look impossibly grown up. He ran around the room, accepting hugs and presents with toddler enthusiasm. Patrick worked the room like a politician, accepting congratulations on his devotion to Gabriel and Daniel. I heard him tell Mrs. Henderson from next door how important it was to provide male guidance for the boy. "Children need father figures," he said, bouncing Gabriel on his knee. "Especially boys." The cake cutting was scheduled for 3:30. At 3:25 I stood up and called for everyone's attention. Before we celebrate Gabriel's special day, I have something to share with all of you. I smiled at the room full of expectant faces. It's about family and truth and making sure Gabriel grows up knowing exactly who he belongs to. I walked to a table near the kitchen and picked up a stack of white envelopes I'd prepared that morning. Each one was labeled with a guest's name in my careful handwriting. I've put together some information that I think you'll all find very interesting, I said, beginning to distribute the envelopes. Please open them now. The room fell silent as people tore open their envelopes. Inside each one was a copy of the DNA test results, along with printed screenshots of text messages I'd found on Patrick's phone, photos of him visiting Mia during her illness, and a detailed timeline of his lies. I watched the faces change as people read. Confusion turned to shock, turned to disgust. Whispers started, then grew louder. Patrick's face went white as snow. Casey, what is this? I walked over to where Daniel stood holding Gabriel, both of them looking uncertain about what was happening. This, I said, taking Gabriel's small hand in mine, is the truth. Patrick, you told me at my sister's grave that she gave you a son. You were wrong. I turned to face the room full of stunned guests. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Gabriel's real father. Daniel Morrison. The man who loved my sister, who held her hand through chemotherapy, who has been raising his son without even knowing Gabriel was his. The silence was deafening. Then Gabriel, oblivious to the adult drama swirling around him, reached up and patted Daniel's face with his tiny palm. Did I? He said clearly. And Daniel, tears streaming down his face, kissed his son's forehead and whispered, "Yes, buddy. I'm your dada." The room exploded after Gabriel called Daniel dada. Voices rose in anger and confusion. Mrs. Henderson clutched her pearls and stared at Patrick like he'd grown horns. Pastor Williams looked between the DNA results and Patrick with undisguised disgust. But Patrick went on the attack. "This is insane," he shouted, waving the papers in the air. "Casey's lost her mind with grief. These documents are fake. Daniel probably paid someone to forge them." Several guests backed away from him, but Patrick wasn't finished. He pointed an accusing finger at Daniel, who was still holding Gabriel protectively. "You think I don't see what's happening here? You want Gabriel's inheritance for yourself. So you seduce my grieving wife into believing these lies." Daniel's face flushed red. "Patrick, stop. You're scaring Gabriel." "I'm scaring him? You're the one trying to steal a child from his family." I watched Patrick unravel with fascination. This was the real man behind the mask. Entitled, vicious, willing to destroy anyone who threatened his plans. The room full of witnesses was seeing him for what he truly was. "Enough," I said quietly, but somehow my voice cut through the chaos. "Everyone please. Gabriel doesn't need to see this." Daniel immediately moved toward the door with Gabriel, several guests following them outside. The remaining people stared at Patrick and me like we were actors in some twisted play. "Patrick," I said, my voice steady as stone. "We need to talk. Privately." After the last guest left, the house felt hollow. Patrick paced the living room like a caged animal while I cleaned up birthday decorations with methodical calm. "How could you do this to me?" he demanded. "Humiliate me in front of everyone? Make me look like some kind of monster?" I folded a tablecloth with careful precision. "I didn't make you anything, Patrick. I just showed people who you really are. Those tests are fake. They have to be. Call the lab yourself. Ask for verification." I met his eyes steadily. "But we both know what they'll tell you." Patrick's face crumpled then, the fight going out of him. He sank onto the couch and put his head in his hands. "I thought he was mine," he whispered. "All this time I thought." "You thought you'd hit the jackpot," I said. "A secret son and a $2 million inheritance. Must have felt like winning the lottery." He looked up sharply. "It wasn't about money. Wasn't it?" I sat across from him, studying his face. "When did you first learn about the family trust, Patrick? Before or after you started sleeping with my sister?" The question hung in the air between us. Patrick's silence was answer enough. "I loved her," he finally said. "I really did love Mia. Maybe you did. But you loved what she could give you more." Over the following weeks, Patrick tried to salvage his reputation. He called mutual friends, explaining his side of the story. He hired a lawyer to challenge the DNA results. He even attempted to file for visitation rights, claiming he'd formed a parental bond with Gabriel during Mia's illness. But the damage was done. Word spread quickly through our small community. Patrick's construction business started losing clients. The bank called about our mortgage payments. Friends stopped returning his calls. Meanwhile, I was busy with my own projects. I'd been thinking about Alan Morrison for months. Not Daniel, his last name was just coincidence, but Alan Morrison, Patrick's former business partner. 3 years ago, Patrick had convinced Alan to invest in a hotel renovation project. When the deal went south, Patrick had protected his own interests while Alan lost his life savings. Alan was working construction now, barely making ends meet. His wife had left him, taking their daughter. He'd lost his house, his dignity, everything. And he blamed Patrick for all of it. I found Alan at a job site on the other side of town. He was installing drywall, his hands rough and scarred from manual labor. When I introduced myself as Patrick's wife, his face hardened. "What do you want?" he asked, not stopping his work. "I want to help you get back what Patrick stole from you." That got his attention. Alan set down his tools and looked at me properly for the first time. "Patrick didn't steal anything. He just made sure he got paid while I got nothing. I know about the resort deal, Alan. I know how he altered the contracts after you'd already signed. I know about the offshore account he used to hide profits." Alan's eyes widened. "How do you know about that?" "Because I've been married to him for 7 years. I know all his tricks." We talked for 2 hours in that half-finished building. Alan told me everything. How Patrick had manipulated the partnership agreement, how he'd used insider information to secure the best properties for himself, how he'd systematically destroyed Alan's reputation in the industry. "I tried to expose him," Alan said bitterly. "But Patrick's lawyers were better than mine. Better funded, anyway. What if I told you I had evidence? Documents that could prove fraud?" Alan laughed harshly. "You'd do that to your own husband?" "My husband confessed to having an affair with my dying sister. My husband tried to steal a child's inheritance. My husband is not the man I married." I met Alan's eyes steadily. "He destroyed your life. He destroyed mine. Maybe it's time we return the favor." The plan we crafted was elegant in its simplicity. Alan still had emails from the hotel deal, correspondence that showed Patrick's deceptive practices. I provided bank records I'd copied from Patrick's files, documents that revealed the hidden payments and altered contracts. But we needed something more recent. Something that would connect Patrick's past fraud to current criminal activity. That's when I remembered Mia's bank account. During her illness, I'd helped Mia manage her finances. She'd given me power of attorney when the treatments made her too sick to handle paperwork. I knew Patrick had convinced her to let him help with some transactions. At the time, I thought he was being supportive. Now I realized he'd been skimming money from her medical expense account. Small amounts, spread over months, probably hoping no one would notice after she died. But I'd kept detailed records. I had copies of every bank statement, every transaction. Alan and I spent weeks building our case. We created a timeline that showed Patrick's pattern of financial manipulation spanning 3 years. We gathered witness statements from other business partners he'd cheated. We even found evidence that he'd been inflating insurance claims on his construction projects. When we felt ready, Alan contacted a detective he knew from his old neighborhood. Detective Rodriguez was familiar with financial fraud cases and eager to investigate someone with Patrick's reputation. The timing had to be perfect. I wanted Patrick to feel secure, confident that the birthday party disaster was behind him. So I played the role of reconciling wife. I cooked his favorite meals, listened to his complaints about unfair treatment, even suggested we take a weekend trip to work on our marriage. Patrick was pathetically grateful for what he thought was forgiveness. He booked us a cabin in the mountains for our wedding anniversary weekend. The same date we'd gotten married 7 years ago, full of hope and love and dreams that now seemed like they belonged to different people. I packed carefully for the trip. Lingerie to maintain the illusion. My laptop to finalize the evidence package. And a bottle of champagne to celebrate when it was all over. "This is exactly what we need," Patrick said as we drove toward the mountains. "Time away from all the drama, just the two of us." "Just the two of us," I agreed, watching the familiar landscape blur past the car window. He had no idea that while he was looking forward to our romantic weekend, Detective Rodriguez was preparing search warrants. By the time we returned home on Sunday, Patrick's carefully constructed world would be nothing but rubble. The cabin was beautiful, exactly the kind of place we would have loved during our early marriage. Patrick opened the champagne and made a toast to new beginnings. We clinked glasses and I smiled like a woman in love. To us, he said. To getting exactly what we deserve, I replied. He thought I was talking about happiness. I was talking about justice. The champagne turned bitter in my mouth as I watched Patrick sleep that Sunday morning. Our anniversary weekend had been perfect from his perspective. Romantic dinners, long walks, intimate conversations about rebuilding our marriage. He'd even talked about trying for children again, now that the Gabriel situation was resolved. I checked my phone while he dozed. 3 missed calls from Detective Rodriguez. It was happening. We should head back early, I said, gently shaking Patrick awake. I have a headache and I'd rather recover at home. He was disappointed but understanding. Always so considerate when he thought he was winning. The drive home felt longer than usual. Patrick hummed along to the radio, his hand resting on my thigh. He talked about plans for renovating our kitchen, maybe taking a real vacation this summer. His mood was lighter than I'd seen it in months. We pulled into our driveway at 2:30 in the afternoon. There were 3 police cars waiting. Patrick's humming stopped abruptly. What the hell? Detective Rodriguez approached as we got out of the car. He was a compact man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Behind him stood 2 uniformed officers and a woman I didn't recognize. Patrick Morrison? I'm Detective Rodriguez. We have a warrant for your arrest. The color drained from Patrick's face. For what? This is insane. Casey, tell them this is a mistake. But I was already walking toward the house, leaving him standing in the driveway as the detective read him his rights. Fraud. Embezzlement. Wire fraud. Money laundering. The charges seemed to go on forever. Casey. Patrick's voice cracked as they put handcuffs on him. Casey, call my lawyer. This is all a misunderstanding. I turned at the front door and looked back at him one last time. I'll call someone, I said quietly. I called Alan Morrison instead. The house felt different after Patrick was gone. Quieter but not in a peaceful way. More like the silence after a storm, when you're assessing the damage and wondering what comes next. The media attention started immediately. By Monday morning, reporters were camped outside our house. Patrick's construction company made the local news, then the regional papers, then somehow went viral on social media. Local businessman arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. The story had everything: betrayal, stolen money, a secret affair with his wife's dying sister. I unplugged the landline and stopped checking social media. The neighbors stared when I went to get my mail. Former friends crossed the street to avoid awkward conversations. I became the wife of the con man, the woman who'd either been incredibly naive or secretly complicit. Most people assumed I was a victim. They were half right. Patrick's lawyer called Tuesday afternoon. A slick man named Harrison who spoke in careful legal phrases and seemed more concerned about his fee than his client's innocence. Mrs. Morrison, your husband's accounts have been frozen pending investigation. I'm afraid that includes joint accounts and assets held in both your names. I understand. He's asked me to request that you post bail. The amount is substantial, but if you could mortgage the house. No. Harrison paused. I'm sorry. I said no. Patrick can find another way to make bail. Mrs. Morrison, I think you should know that the prosecution has substantial evidence. Financial records, email correspondence, witness testimony. This isn't going away. Good, I said and hung up. Patrick tried calling from jail that evening. I let it go to voicemail. Then I deleted the message without listening to it. I spent the next few weeks methodically erasing Patrick from our shared life. I changed the locks first, then opened new bank accounts in my name only. I called his employer and his business partners, playing the role of the shocked wife discovering her husband's crimes. I had no idea, I told anyone who would listen. I trusted him completely. I feel so betrayed. It wasn't entirely a lie. The house began to feel like mine again. I moved Patrick's clothes to the garage, then donated them to charity. I repainted the bedroom walls from the beige he'd preferred to a soft lavender that reminded me of Mia's old room. I bought new sheets, new curtains, new everything. Gabriel's pictures still hung in the hallway. Daniel had been bringing him by occasionally, Tentative visits where we'd sit in the living room and I'd read stories or help with puzzles. Gabriel was thriving with Daniel, growing more confident and talkative every week. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked one afternoon as Gabriel napped on my couch. "This can't be easy for you." I looked at the sleeping toddler, his dark hair falling across his forehead just like Mia's used to. "I'm exactly where I need to be." Daniel didn't understand, but he didn't push. He was dealing with his own adjustment, suddenly becoming a single father to a child he'd only recently learned was his. But he was good at it. Natal. Gabriel adored him. Patrick's trial was set for 6 months away. His lawyer kept calling, wanting me to testify as a character witness. I told him I wouldn't be available. Instead, I focused on building something new. I enrolled in grief counseling, not for Patrick's loss but for Mia's. For the sister I'd loved and lost, for the marriage I'd believed in, for the naive woman I'd been before I learned what betrayal really meant. "Tell me about your anger," Dr. Martinez asked during one session. "I'm not angry anymore," I said, and realized it was true. I was furious for a while. But anger is exhausting. It burns through you and leaves nothing behind. What replaced it? I thought about that for a long moment. Purpose, I think. Clarity. The house where Mia had died became my refuge. I moved there permanently after the divorce papers were filed. Patrick could have our old house when he got out of prison, if he could still afford it after paying legal fees and restitution. Mia's house held better memories anyway. I set up an art studio in her old sewing room, started painting again for the first time in years. I planted a garden in the backyard where Gabriel could play when he visited. I turned Mia's bedroom into a guest room for Daniel and Gabriel when they stayed overnight. The reporters eventually moved on to newer scandals. The neighbors stopped staring. Life found a new rhythm, quieter but more honest than before. Patrick wrote letters from jail. Long, rambling things full of apologies and explanations and pleas for forgiveness. I read the first few, then started throwing them away unopened. What was the point? Nothing he could say would change what he'd done or undo the hurt he'd caused. The last letter I opened was different. Shorter. Just one line. "Why did you destroy me?" I sat with that question for hours, holding the paper in my hands. Then I folded it carefully and put it in the drawer with all the other things I was done with. Old wedding photos, love letters from our early years, the positive pregnancy test I'd saved from the one time we'd gotten our hopes up. I didn't destroy Patrick. Patrick destroyed himself. I just stopped protecting him from the consequences. Spring came early that year. I planted flowers in Mia's old garden boxes, choosing varieties that would bloom in succession from March through October. When Gabriel visited, he helped me water them with a tiny plastic watering can Daniel had bought him. "Flowers are pretty," Gabriel said one afternoon, his vocabulary expanding daily. "Yes, they are," I agreed, watching him carefully sprinkle water on the marigold seedlings. "And they grow back every year even after winter kills them." Gabriel nodded solemnly, as if this was the most important information he'd ever received. Then he ran off to chase a butterfly, leaving me alone with the garden and the gentle afternoon sun. Not all things buried stay dead, I thought. Some rise stronger. The butterfly Gabriel had been chasing landed on one of the marigold buds, its orange and black wings fluttering gently in the afternoon breeze. I watched it for a moment, thinking about transformations and second chances, before Gabriel's laughter drew my attention back to the present. "Aunt Casey, look." He pointed at a ladybug crawling across his tiny palm. "It's red." "It's beautiful," I said, kneeling beside him. At 3 years old now, Gabriel was becoming more like Mia every day, curious about everything, gentle with living creatures, quick to find wonder in small moments. Daniel appeared around the corner of the house, carrying grocery bags. "Sorry I took so long. The store was packed." He paused, watching Gabriel show me his ladybug. "He's been talking about the garden all week." "Has he?" I helped Gabriel carefully place the ladybug on a leaf. "Well, the flowers need a good gardener." These visits had become routine over the past year. Daniel would bring Gabriel every few weeks, and they'd stay for dinner or sometimes the whole weekend. It wasn't about replacing what we'd lost. Nothing could do that. It was about building something new from the pieces that remained. Patrick's trial had ended 4 months ago. Guilty on all counts. 7 years in federal prison plus restitution to his victims. The judge had been particularly harsh about his exploitation of Mia's illness, calling it Unconscionable manipulation of a vulnerable woman. I hadn't attended the sentencing. I'd been here instead teaching Gabriel how to plant sunflower seeds. The seasons changed and so did I. I started volunteering at a women's shelter downtown, helping other women navigate the legal system when their partners betrayed them. Many of their stories echoed mine: financial manipulation, emotional abuse, the slow erosion of trust that happens so gradually you don't notice until it's too late. "How did you know?" asked Sarah, a young mother whose husband had been stealing from their joint accounts. "How did you figure out what he was really doing?" I handed her a tissue and considered the question. I stopped making excuses for him. I stopped assuming his explanations were true just because I wanted them to be. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I feel so stupid. All the signs were there." "You're not stupid. You're human. We want to believe the people we love are telling us the truth." These conversations became a form of healing I hadn't expected. Each woman I helped felt like a small victory against the Patrick Morrisons of the world. Each person who learned to trust their instincts again felt like justice growing in soil that had once been poisoned. Gabriel started preschool that fall. Daniel was nervous about leaving him, but Gabriel thrived. His teacher said he was particularly good at helping other children when they were sad or scared. "He has an unusual amount of empathy for someone his age," Ms. Rodriguez told Daniel during parent conferences. "It's like he understands that people can be hurting even when they don't show it." Daniel shared this with me over dinner one evening and I felt a familiar ache in my chest. Gabriel would never remember Mia, but somehow he carried pieces of her kindness with him. "Do you think he'll want to know about her someday?" Daniel asked. "About what really happened?" I set down my fork and considered the question. "I think he'll want to know that his mother loved him enough to protect him, and that she made sure he ended up with the right father." The anniversary of Mia's death approached quietly. I'd been dreading it for weeks, unsure how to mark the day or what it should mean now that so much had changed. Then Gabriel solved the problem for me. "Can we visit Mama Mia?" he asked one afternoon, using the name he'd coined for my sister based on the stories we told him. "I want to show her my new drawing." Daniel looked at me questioningly. We'd never taken Gabriel to the cemetery before, unsure if he was old enough to understand. "What did you draw?" I asked Gabriel. He ran to get his artwork from the kitchen table, a colorful picture of 3 stick figures standing in front of a house. "That's me and Daddy and you," he explained, pointing to each figure. "And this is our house where we have dinner and plant flowers." The innocence of it broke my heart and mended it at the same time. In Gabriel's world, the 3 of us were simply family. No complicated history, no betrayal or loss, just the people who loved him and took care of him. "I think Mama Mia would love to see your drawing," I said. We went the next morning, a crisp October day with leaves crunching under our feet. Gabriel held both our hands as we walked through the cemetery, chattering about the different flowers and asking why some graves had angels while others had crosses. When we reached Mia's headstone, Gabriel became quiet. The marble was weathered now, softened by a year of seasons. Someone, probably our mother's sister who lived across the state, had left fresh flowers the week before. "Is she really under there?" Gabriel asked, his voice very small. "Her body is," Daniel said gently. "But the part of her that loved you, that's still here with us." Gabriel nodded solemnly and placed his drawing against the headstone, weighing it down with a small rock he'd collected on the walkover. Then he sat cross-legged in the grass and began talking to the stone as if Mia could hear him. "Hi, Mama Mia. I drew you a picture. Aunt Casey taught me how to make the sun yellow instead of orange. And Daddy says I'm getting really good at tying my shoes." I felt tears coming and didn't try to stop them. This was what Mia had wanted. Gabriel surrounded by love, protected from the ugliness that had shaped his earliest months. She'd made her choices, kept her secrets, and somehow orchestrated a future where her son would be safe and cherished. After a while, Gabriel stood up and walked over to me. "Aunt Casey, are you sad?" "A little," I admitted. "But not the bad kind of sad. The kind of sad that comes with loving someone very much." He considered this with the seriousness of a child trying to understand complex emotions. Then he hugged my legs tightly. "It's okay to be sad sometimes," he said, apparently quoting something Daniel had taught him. "Daddy says feelings are like weather, they change." We stayed a few more minutes, then walked back to the car. Gabriel fell asleep in his car seat on the drive home, still clutching a leaf he'd picked up near Mia's grave. That evening, after Daniel and Gabriel had gone home, I sat in my studio and started a new painting. Not of Mia this time, but of the garden we'd built together. The one where Gabriel played and learned and grew into the remarkable little person he was becoming. The painting took weeks to finish. Layer by layer, I built up colors that captured not just the visual beauty of the space, but the emotional weight of it. The hope and healing that had grown there. The way love could take root even in soil that had been tainted by betrayal. When it was done, I hung it in the living room where Gabriel could see it during his visits. He studied it seriously, pointing out details I'd included. The butterfly he'd chased, the ladybug that had crawled across his palm, the sunflowers that now stood taller than he was. "It looks like home," he said simply. And it was. Not the home I'd planned when I married Patrick, not the life I'd imagined when Mia was still alive and healthy. But home nonetheless, built from truth instead of lies, rooted in love instead of manipulation. People sometimes asked if I regretted exposing Patrick. If I thought I should have handled things differently, been more forgiving, found a way to work through our problems. The answer was always the same. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive. Some lies are too destructive to overlook. Gabriel was living proof of that truth. In a world where Patrick had succeeded, Gabriel would have grown up believing lies about his father, his inheritance, his very identity. Instead, he was growing up surrounded by people who chose honesty even when it was painful. That seemed like justice to me. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the quiet kind that grows slowly year by year, in the hearts of people who refuse to let betrayal have the final word. My name is Casey Walsh. I'm not a victim or a hero, just a woman who learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to participate in someone else's lies. And sometimes that's enough to change everything. If this story of calculated justice had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Casey handed out those white envelopes at Gabriel's birthday party, revealing the truth to everyone. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.
I'm Rachel, 30 years old, raised in what I thought was a close-knit family in suburban Boston. My whole life, I've been the responsible one, while my siblings took advantage. But last Christmas, everything I believed about my family shattered when I discovered their coordinated betrayal. The shock of finding out they'd planned a secret vacation without me changed everything. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to choose between family obligation and self-respect. Growing up in our modest colonial house in Lexington, Massachusetts, I always felt secure in my family's love. My mother, Margaret, taught 5th grade at the local elementary school, while my father, Thomas, worked as an accountant for a mid-sized firm downtown. We weren't wealthy, but we had enough. My brother Kevin is 4 years older than me, and my sister Megan is 3 years younger. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family: Sunday dinners, summer vacations to Cape Cod, and holiday traditions that never changed. But beneath the surface, roles were firmly established early on. Kevin, as the oldest, was the adventurous one, always dreaming big and taking risks. Megan, the baby of the family, was the creative, free spirit who needed protection and guidance. And me? I was the dependable middle child, the mediator, the problem solver. When we were kids, if Kevin broke a window playing baseball, I'd help clean up before our parents got home. When Megan forgot her homework, I'd drive back to school with her to sweet-talk the teacher. Being the responsible one became my identity, and for a long time, I was proud of it. As we grew older, these childhood roles intensified rather than evolved. After college, I secured a job at a marketing firm and worked my way up to executive level through 80-hour weeks and sacrifice vacations. Meanwhile, Kevin bounced from one entrepreneurial opportunity to another: a food truck that lasted 6 months, an app idea he never fully developed, a dropshipping business that collapsed after a year. Every time one of Kevin's ventures failed, he'd approach our parents for a business loan. They'd empty their savings to help him, convinced that his next idea would be the one to succeed. When their funds ran dry, Kevin would turn to me with passionate pitches and promises of repayment once he made it big. Megan's pattern was different, but equally draining. She enrolled in art school, then dropped out after a semester to find herself. Next came culinary school, abandoned when the hours proved too demanding. Then nursing, teaching certification, web design. Each new passion accompanied by requests for tuition, apartment deposits, car repairs, and emergency rent money when she quit jobs that weren't fulfilling her creative spirit. Our parents enabled both of them, making excuses like, "Kevin just hasn't found his path yet," or "Megan is so sensitive, she needs time to discover her purpose." But with me, the expectations were crystal clear. I should be financially independent, career-focused, and available whenever family needed help. By my late 20s, I'd lent Kevin over $40,000 that was never repaid. I'd covered Megan's rent 6 times when she was between jobs. I'd contributed to our parents' household expenses when they drained their retirement accounts to fund Kevin's latest business idea, all while managing my own mortgage, car payment, and student loans. The resentment built slowly. Each time I received a panicked call about an overdue bill or a teary plea for just a small loan until next month, I felt a little more used. But they were family, and in our house, family always came first. 3 years ago, I met Marcus at a charity event hosted by my company. He was smart, stable, and saw through my family's dynamic immediately. On our 3rd date, after I canceled dinner plans because Megan needed help moving out of her apartment, her roommates were totally toxic, Marcus asked gently, "Do you realize you're enabling their dependency?" I dismissed his concerns. "They're going through rough patches. They'd do the same for me." But would they? The question lingered as our relationship deepened. Marcus came from a family where everyone pulled their weight. His brother and sister were independent, and family gatherings were about connection, not financial assistance. Still, I held on to hope that my siblings would mature, that my parents would establish boundaries, that we'd eventually become the truly supportive family I pretended we already were. Every Christmas, we gathered at my parents' house for our traditional celebration. Despite everything, I cherished these moments when we seemed like the loving family I wanted us to be. Last year, Marcus proposed after 2 years together. I was ecstatic and immediately knew I wanted to announce our engagement at Christmas, when everyone would be together. Despite Marcus's concerns about my family's reaction, I was convinced they'd be happy for me. This milestone, I thought, might even help reset our family dynamic. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, I splurged on gifts despite my tight budget. A premium coffee machine for my parents to replace their broken one, noise-canceling headphones for Kevin who complained about distractions while working, and a professional quality camera for Megan who'd recently shown interest in photography. I wrapped each gift meticulously, imagining their faces when they opened them. I picture my mother's joy when I showed her my engagement ring, my father's proud tears, my siblings' excitement about gaining Marcus as a brother-in-law. After years of feeling undervalued, I convinced myself that this Christmas would be different. I had no idea how different it would actually be, just not in the way I'd hoped. December was always my busiest time at work. As the marketing director for our firm's largest accounts, I spent weeks finalizing year-end campaigns and preparing strategy presentations for January. Last year was particularly demanding with 3 new clients added to my portfolio in November. Despite the crushing workload, I carved out time to plan the perfect Christmas. Marcus and I decided to wait until Christmas Day to announce our engagement, imagining it as the highlight of our family gathering. I even bought a special bottle of champagne to celebrate the moment. "Are you sure you want to share the spotlight with Christmas?" Marcus asked one evening as we discussed our announcement. "We could have a separate dinner. Make it all about us." "Christmas is when everyone's together and happy," I insisted. "It'll make it even more special." With my typical efficiency, I created a detailed shopping list for gifts. Despite being on a strict budget to save for our future home with Marcus, I was determined to give everyone something meaningful. I spent hours researching the perfect coffee machine for my parents, comparing features and reading reviews until I found one that would last for years. For Kevin, I chose headphones that would help with his claimed productivity issues. Megan's camera was professional grade, giving her the tools to pursue photography seriously if she stuck with it. The gift stretched my credit card to its limit, but I convinced myself it was worth it. This Christmas wasn't just about tradition. It was about celebrating new beginnings and strengthening family bonds. 2 weeks before Christmas, I called my mother to coordinate my usual role in the holiday preparations. "Don't worry about coming early this year, honey," she said, her voice oddly pitched. "Dad and I have everything under control." This was unusual. For the past 5 years, I'd arrived the day before Christmas Eve to help cook, clean, and decorate. My mother always insisted she needed my help. "Are you sure? I don't mind coming Thursday instead of Friday." No, she said quickly. "Actually, we're going to be quite busy with church activities. Just come Christmas Eve morning like everyone else." When I hung up, I felt a twinge of unease but dismissed it. Perhaps my parents were finally recognizing my busy schedule and trying not to burden me. The next day, I called Kevin to coordinate our arrivals. "When are you heading to Mom and Dad's?" I asked. He hesitated. "Probably Christmas Eve, same as always. Want a carpool? I can pick you up."
No.
He answered too quickly. "I mean, I might have some last-minute shopping, don't want to hold you up." Similar conversations with Megan left me increasingly confused. She claimed she was figuring out her schedule and might have a ride with a friend. When I pointed out that she lived in the opposite direction from our parents' house, she mumbled something about making stops along the way and changed the subject. A week before Christmas, I stopped by my parents' house unannounced with some homemade cookies. I'd finished work early and thought it would be a nice surprise. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed my father hurriedly closing the garage door. Through the gap, I glimpsed several suitcases. "Rachel, what a surprise," he said, his smile too bright. "Your mother's not home right now." "What's with the luggage?" I asked. "Are you going somewhere?" "Just organizing for the church donation drive," he answered, guiding me away from the garage. These old suitcases have been cluttering the attic. Inside, the house was immaculate, unusual for my parents, who typically left Christmas preparations until the last minute. When I mentioned this, my father shrugged and said, "Your mother's been on a cleaning spree. You know how she gets." I noticed travel brochures hastily shoved under a magazine on the coffee table but didn't comment. As I was leaving, my mother called, and I overheard my father say, "Yes, she just stopped by unexpectedly. No, I don't think she suspects anything." That evening, I mentioned these strange occurrences to Marcus. "Something feels off with my family," I said. "Everyone's being weird about Christmas plans." Marcus frowned. "Do you think they might be planning something without you?" "No way." I dismissed the thought. Christmas is sacred in our family. We always spend it together. But the seed of doubt was planted. I found myself checking my siblings' social media more frequently, looking for clues. Kevin had been unusually quiet online, and Megan's posts were vague about her holiday plans. 3 days before Christmas, I received a group text from my mother. "Reminder to everyone, Christmas Eve dinner at 6, church service at 9, presents Christmas morning at 10. Can't wait to have all my children under one roof." The message reassured me. I was being paranoid, letting work stress affect my perception. Of course we would have our normal Christmas. Of course my family wouldn't exclude me from anything important. When Christmas Eve arrived, Marcus and I drove to my parent house with our gifts and champagne. The familiar sight of my childhood home decorated with multicolored lights and the plastic Santa my father had displayed every year since I was born filled me with warmth. Whatever strange vibes I'd been feeling had to be in my head. My mother greeted us at the door with hugs and exclamations about how tired I looked. My father clapped Marcus on the back and offered him a beer. Kevin and Megan were already there, both glancing at their phones more than usual. Aunt Patty and Uncle Bill arrived shortly after us, along with my cousins Amber and Taylor. I noticed them exchange looks with my parents that seemed loaded with meaning. When I hugged Aunt Patty, she whispered, "It's so good to see you, dear. We've missed you at family gatherings." This struck me as odd. I'd attended every family event in the past year. During dinner, conversation flowed, but felt somehow rehearsed. Everyone asked about my work, but changed the subject when I inquired about their plans for the week after Christmas. Kevin avoided eye contact, and Megan seemed unusually interested in the table centerpiece. After dinner, as we prepared to leave for the church service, Megan realized she'd forgotten her phone in the kitchen. She asked if I could grab it while she put on her coat. Always the helpful sister, I agreed. In the kitchen, I found her phone on the counter. As I picked it up, a notification flashed on the screen, a group text that included my parents, Kevin, and several other family members. The preview showed just enough. Flight confirmed for 10 a.m. 12/26. Everyone packed. My heart sank. I told myself there must be an explanation. Maybe they were planning a surprise for Marcus and me? But why wouldn't they include me in the planning? With shaking hands, I returned Megan's phone and said nothing. Throughout the church service, I sat in a daze, barely hearing the familiar carols as questions tumbled through my mind. What were they planning? Why was I excluded? Should I confront them now or wait? That night, as Marcus and I settled into my old bedroom, I whispered my discovery. "You need to ask them directly," he advised. "Don't let this ruin our engagement announcement, but don't let it go either." I nodded, determined to enjoy Christmas morning despite my growing anxiety. Whatever was happening, I would deal with it after our special moment. I had no idea that by the next afternoon, I would be driving away from my childhood home with tears streaming down my face, my trust in my family shattered beyond repair. Christmas morning dawned bright and cold. I woke early, anxiety churning in my stomach, but forced a smile as Marcus and I joined everyone downstairs. The living room looked picture-perfect, twinkling lights on the tree, presents arranged beneath it, the scent of cinnamon rolls baking in the oven. My mother had even put out the special Christmas china we'd used since I was a child. "Merry Christmas, everyone." My father boomed, distributing cups of coffee. Kevin looked hungover, slouched in the armchair, while Megan perched on the floor near the tree, already sorting gifts into piles. "Let's get started with presents," my mother suggested. "Rachel, why don't you hand them out like you used to when you were little?" I played along, determined to maintain the Christmas spirit despite my unease. One by one, I distributed gifts, saving the special ones I'd brought for last. When everyone had a small mountain before them, we began opening them in our family's traditional youngest to oldest order. Megan unwrapped my gift first, lifting the professional camera from its box. "Wow," she said flatly. "This looks expensive." "It's the one you were looking at online," I prompted. "Remember? You said it would be perfect for landscape photography."
Oh, right.
"Thanks." She set it aside without examining the features I'd spent hours researching. Kevin's reaction to his noise-canceling headphones was similarly underwhelming. "Cool. Thanks, Rach," he muttered, barely glancing at them before moving on to the next gift. My parents showed more enthusiasm for their coffee machine, but I caught them exchanging a glance that seemed almost guilty. My own gifts were thoughtful but oddly impersonal, a generic sweater from my parents, a gift card from Kevin, bath products from Megan. Nothing that suggested they'd put much thought into what I might actually want or need. As the unwrapping wound down, I squeezed Marcus's hand, signaling it was time for our announcement. He nodded encouragingly. "Everyone," I said, standing up. "Marcus and I have some news to share." All eyes turned to me, and for a moment, I felt the familiar warmth of being surrounded by family. "We're engaged." I held out my hand to display the vintage sapphire ring Marcus had given me. He proposed last month, and we wanted to tell everyone together on Christmas. There was a beat of silence before my mother rose to hug me. "Congratulations, honey. That's wonderful news." My father shook Marcus's hand. "Welcome to the family, son." Kevin raised his coffee mug in a half-hearted toast. "Congrats, you guys." Megan smiled tightly. "The ring is pretty." Their reactions felt muted, almost distracted. No one asked about wedding plans or how Marcus had proposed. No one suggested opening the champagne I'd brought. After a few minutes of stilted conversation, my mother announced it was time to prepare Christmas dinner. "I'll help," I offered automatically. "No need," she replied. "Megan's already helping me." In the sudden shuffle of activity, Megan left her phone on the couch. A notification lit up the screen, and without thinking, I glanced at it. It was a message from someone named Bahamas Group that read, "Final reminder. Meet at airport 8 a.m. tomorrow. Don't forget passports and sunscreen." My stomach dropped. I picked up the phone, and before I could stop myself, I opened the message thread. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. It was a group chat including my parents, Kevin, Megan, Aunt Patty, Uncle Bill, and my cousins, everyone present at our Christmas gathering except Marcus and me. The messages detailed plans for a 10-day family vacation to the Bahamas, departing December 26th. They'd been planning it for months, coordinating flights, sharing resort information, discussing excursions. One message from my mother read, "Remember, not a word to Rachel. She's so busy with work anyway, and we don't want her to feel left out." Kevin had replied, "She'd probably just say she can't come because of some deadline." Megan's response, "Plus, she'd bring Marcus, and this is supposed to be just family." Just family. The words burned into my brain. Apparently, I was family when they needed money or help, but not when it came to creating happy memories together. When Megan returned and saw me with her phone, her face drained of color. "Why are you going through my phone?" she demanded, snatching it away. "Why are you all going to the Bahamas without telling me?" I countered, my voice shaking. The room fell silent. Marcus moved to stand beside me, his hand on my shoulder in silent support. My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "What's going on?" "I know about the trip," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "The one you've been planning for months. The one everyone here knows about except Marcus and me." My father stepped forward, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Rachel, it's not what you think." "Really?" "Because it looks like my entire family planned a vacation together and deliberately excluded me." "We didn't exclude you," my mother insisted. We knew you were busy with work, and we didn't want to make you feel bad about not being able to come. So instead of inviting me and letting me decide, you all lied to my face? For months." Kevin shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "You're always so busy with work anyway. We figured you wouldn't want to take the time off." "And we wanted a real family vacation," Megan added, then flinched at her own words. "A real family vacation," I repeated slowly. "So Marcus and I aren't real family?" "That's not what she meant," my father interjected quickly. "It's just that with your work schedule and Marcus's family obligations, coordinating everyone would have been complicated." "Complicated?" I echoed, the hurt in my chest hardening into anger. "More complicated than orchestrating this elaborate lie? Than making sure no one slipped up and told me? Then clearing your browser history so I wouldn't see your vacation research?" No one answered. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. Aunt Patty cleared her throat. "Since July, I think." 6 months. For 6 months, every conversation, every family dinner, every text message had contained this secret. "And who's paying for this trip?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. The uncomfortable glances between my parents and siblings confirmed it. "Kevin, when you borrowed $3,000 from me in September for business equipment, was that for this trip?" He had the decency to look ashamed. "I was going to pay you back." "And Megan, when I helped you with rent in October because you said your hours got cut, was that so you could save for this vacation?" She studied the floor, saying nothing. "Mom, Dad, that plumbing emergency you needed help with last month. Was there even a leak?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Rachel, please understand. We just wanted a nice family vacation. Without me." I finished for her. "You wanted a nice family vacation without me." "You're making this a bigger deal than it is," Kevin complained. "It's just a trip." "It's not just a trip," I said, my voice breaking. "It's the fact that you all went out of your way to hide it from me. It's the fact that you used me for money to fund it. It's the fact that none of you considered for a moment how this would make me feel." "We did consider your feelings," my father insisted. "That's why we didn't tell you. We didn't want you to feel left out." The twisted logic was almost laughable. "So instead you deliberately left me out? How does that make sense?" No one had a good answer. The room filled with awkward silence, broken only by my mother's quiet sniffling. Marcus squeezed my shoulder. "I think we should go," he said softly. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. "We're leaving. Enjoy your vacation." "Rachel, don't go like this," my mother pleaded. "It's Christmas." "Yes, it is," I agreed. "And I just found out what my family really thinks of me. Best gift ever." As Marcus and I gathered our things, my family's excuses continued. They hadn't meant to hurt me. They'd planned to tell me eventually. They'd bring me a souvenir. Each word only deepened the wound. I walked out of my childhood home without looking back, the carefully wrapped presents I'd brought sitting forgotten under the tree. In the car, Marcus drove in silence while I stared out the window, tears streaming down my face. My phone buzzed with messages from my family, but I couldn't bear to read them. "They used me," I whispered finally. "All these years, they've been using me." Marcus reached for my hand. "What do you want to do?" I closed my eyes, the weight of years of unequal treatment crushing down on me. "I don't know yet, but I know things can't go back to the way they were." As we drove away from my past, I had no idea that this painful revelation would ultimately lead me to the strongest decision of my life, and eventually, to freedom I never knew was possible. The week after Christmas passed in a blur of grief and anger. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, unable to face client meetings while my emotional world imploded. Marcus brought me tea and sat with me through tearful nights, never once saying, "I told you so," about my family's behavior. My phone filled with messages I couldn't bring myself to read. Notifications from Instagram showed my family's vacation photos. Sunset beach walks, fancy resort dinners, smiling group pictures with everyone wearing matching tropical shirts. Each image was a fresh wound, proof that they were having the time of their lives while I processed the betrayal. "You should block them," Marcus suggested gently on the third day, after finding me sobbing over a photo of my parents and siblings on a catamaran cruise. "At least until you're ready to deal with this." "I need to see," I insisted. "I need to understand what was worth lying to me for months." But looking at their smiling faces only deepened my confusion and hurt. How could they enjoy themselves knowing what they'd done? Did I matter so little to them? On New Year's Eve, while Marcus and I sat quietly at home instead of attending the party we'd planned to go to, I finally opened their messages. From Mom: "Rachel, please don't overreact. We love you and never meant to hurt you. Call me when you've calmed down." From Dad: "Your mother is upset. This vacation was her idea to bring the family together. Don't ruin it for her." From Kevin: "Seriously, sis? Drama much? It's just a vacation. I'll pay you back when I get home." From Megan: "I'm sorry you found out that way, but you're being super dramatic right now. Not everything is about you. Not a single genuine apology. Not one message that acknowledged the real issue. That they had conspired to exclude me while using my financial support to fund their trip." I threw my phone across the room, startling Marcus. "They still don't get it," I said, fresh tears streaming down my face. "They think I'm overreacting because I wasn't invited on vacation. They don't understand that it's about the lying, the manipulation, the taking me for granted." Marcus retrieved my phone, checking that it wasn't broken. "Maybe they can't see it because it's been the pattern for so long. You've always been the responsible one, the giver, the fixer. They don't know how to relate to you any other way." His words struck me with the force of revelation. He was right. Our family dynamic had been set in stone since childhood. Kevin and Megan took, my parents enabled them, and I provided. I'd never seriously challenged this pattern, always giving in to the pressure to be the dependable daughter, the generous sister. The next day, I started therapy with Dr. Fiona Barrett, a family systems specialist Marcus had researched for me. In our first session, I poured out the Christmas story and years of background. "What I hear," Dr. Barrett said carefully, "is that you've been cast in a role that no longer serves you, but your family resists any attempt to redefine that role." "Why?" I asked. "Why can't they see how unfair it's been?" "Because the current system works for them," she explained. If you change your role, everyone else has to change too, and change is uncomfortable. They're going to push back hard to maintain the status quo. Over the next few weeks, Dr. Barrett helped me see that the Christmas incident wasn't an isolated event, but the culmination of a lifetime of imbalance. She encouraged me to journal about other instances when my family had taken advantage of my generosity. The list was painfully long. Kevin borrowing my car for 6 months during college, returning it with a damaged transmission he couldn't pay to fix. Megan ruining my favorite dress before an important interview, then dismissing my upset because it's just clothes. My parents expecting me to host and fund Thanksgiving dinner last year because they'd spent their holiday budget on a weekend getaway with friends. As January progressed, I slowly returned to my normal work routine, but my perspective had fundamentally shifted. I checked my bank statements and credit card history, calculating exactly how much money I'd given my family over the years. The total was staggering, over $70,000 since I'd started working full-time. What could I have done with that money? Marcus and I had been saving for a down payment on a house, delaying our plans because my finances were constantly drained by family emergencies. I could have taken the international vacation I'd always dreamed of, or invested in additional education, or simply built a more secure financial future. The anger that replaced my initial hurt was clarifying. I began to see that my willingness to always say yes hadn't actually helped my family. It had enabled patterns of dependency and entitlement that weren't healthy for any of us. In late January, my family returned from their Bahamas trip. My mother called immediately, leaving a voicemail that managed to sound both concerned and annoyed. "Rachel, this silent treatment is childish. We need to talk about what happened. Call me back." I didn't. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to Dr. Barrett, who pointed out the subtle manipulation. Framing my need for space as childish, making the issue about my response rather than their actions. A few days later, Kevin texted, "Hey sis, I need to borrow $600 for rent. Things are tight after the trip. I'll pay you back next month for sure." The audacity was breathtaking. No acknowledgement of what had happened, no real apology, just another request for money. In the past, I would have transferred the funds immediately, accepting his empty promise of repayment. This time, I simply replied, "No." His response came within seconds. "What do you mean no? I need it by tomorrow, or I'll get late fees." "That's not my problem," I wrote back. "Figure it out yourself." The barrage of texts that followed ranged from disbelief to anger to guilt-tripping. How could I leave him hanging? What kind of sister was I? Did I want him to get evicted? I turned off my phone and went to dinner with Marcus, who raised his glass in a toast when I told him what I'd done. "To setting boundaries," he said. "It's about time." The next day, my parents called, clearly having heard from Kevin. "Rachel," my father began without preamble, "your brother is in a difficult position. I know you're still upset about Christmas, but family helps family." "You're right," I agreed. "Family does help family. Like when family invites you on vacation instead of lying to your face. Like when family doesn't use you as an ATM." "That's not fair," my mother interjected. "We've always been there for you." "When?" I challenged. "When have you ever put me first? When have you ever sacrificed for me the way I've sacrificed for all of you?" The silence was telling. "I've been thinking about this a lot," I continued, "about how our family works. And I've realized it's not working for me anymore." "What does that mean?" my father asked, wariness in his voice. "It means I'm done being the family bank. It means I'm taking a step back until I figure out what kind of relationship I actually want with all of you." After I hung up, Megan called next, her approach more emotional. "Rachel," she sobbed, "Kevin told me what you said to Mom and Dad. How can you abandon us like this? We're your family." "Yes, you are," I agreed. "And families should treat each other with respect and honesty. Did you respect me when you lied about the vacation? Were you honest when you asked for rent money that you used for a beach trip?" "That's different," she insisted. "I really did need help with rent. I just also wanted to go on the trip." "And you didn't think I deserved to know that?" You didn't think I deserved the chance to decide if I wanted to subsidize your vacation. You're being so cold, she accused. This isn't like you. Maybe the Rachel you knew. The one who always said yes, who always put everyone else first. Maybe she doesn't exist anymore. As January turned to February, the pressure intensified. Extended family members began calling, Aunt Patty suggesting I was tearing the family apart over a simple misunderstanding, Uncle Bill insisting that family forgives. The only supporter was my cousin Jessica, who called one evening with a different perspective. I just want you to know, she said quietly, that I understand why you're upset. They did the same thing to me last year with the ski trip. No one told me until I saw the photos on Facebook. Her solidarity was a lifeline. How did you handle it? I asked. Not as well as you, she admitted. I forgave them immediately and pretended it didn't hurt. But it did, and honestly, nothing changed. They did it again this year with the Bahamas trip. Her words confirmed what I was beginning to understand, that without real consequences, my family would never change their behavior. The pattern would continue indefinitely, with me always cast as the reliable provider who could be taken for granted. As winter progressed, I maintained my distance while working with Dr. Barrett to process my feelings. The space allowed me to see our family dynamic with painful clarity, how my parents had always favored my siblings, how Kevin and Megan had learned to manipulate rather than self-sustain, how I'd been both victim and enabler of this unhealthy system. What do you want a relationship with your family to look like going forward? Dr. Barrett asked during one session. I considered the question carefully. I want mutual respect. I want honesty. I want them to value me for who I am, not what I can provide. And if they can't give you that? The question hung in the air, challenging me to consider a possibility I'd never allowed myself to face, that perhaps my family was incapable of the relationship I deserved. Then I need to accept that and adjust my expectations accordingly, I said finally. I can't keep hoping they'll change if they've shown me repeatedly that they won't. It was a turning point. Instead of trying to fix our broken family system, I began to focus on healing myself. I stopped checking their social media. I invested more energy in friendships that felt balanced and supportive. I opened a new savings account specifically for the house down payment, watching with satisfaction as the balance grew without constant withdrawals for family emergencies. Marcus noticed the change in me. You seem lighter, he observed one evening as we cooked dinner together. Like you've put down a heavy backpack you've been carrying for years. He was right. The constant anxiety about family needs had lifted, replaced by a growing sense of empowerment. For the first time in my adult life, my resources, emotional, financial, temporal, were truly my own. But my family wasn't ready to release their grip so easily. As spring approached and they realized my boundaries weren't temporary, their tactics escalated from guilt to anger to desperation. The confrontation that would finally force me to make the hardest and ultimately most liberating decision of my life was brewing. And when it came, there would be no going back to the person I was before. March arrived with a flurry of renewed contact from my family. They seemed to have collectively decided that enough time had passed for me to get over the Christmas incident. My mother called on a Sunday afternoon while Marcus and I were painting our apartment. Rachel, this has gone on long enough, she began without preamble. We need to have a family dinner and put this behind us. I set down my paintbrush, steeling myself. I'm not ready for that. It's been over 2 months. How much longer are you going to punish us for one little mistake? It wasn't one little mistake. I corrected her. It was months of coordinated lying. It was using me for money to fund a vacation I wasn't invited to. It was treating me like I only matter when I'm useful. My mother sighed dramatically. You always were sensitive. We didn't tell you about the trip because we knew you'd react exactly like this, making everything about you. Her words hit like a slap. Even now, she couldn't acknowledge the real harm they'd caused. I'm not having this conversation, I said quietly and hung up. The next day, my father called my office line, knowing I would likely answer a work call. Rachel, your mother is very upset, he said when I picked up. I'm upset too, Dad. Look, We made a mistake not telling you about the trip. We apologize for that. But it's time to move forward as a family. Have you actually thought about why I'm hurt? I asked. Has anyone in our family considered that this isn't about a vacation, but about years of being taken for granted? That's not fair, he protested. We've always appreciated you. Appreciation isn't just words, Dad. It's actions. It's treating someone with respect. It's not lying to them or using them. He was silent for a moment. What do you want from us, Rachel? It was the first genuine question anyone in my family had asked since this began. I want you to understand why this hurt me so deeply. I want acknowledgement that our family dynamic has been unbalanced for years. I want real change, not just empty apologies so we can pretend everything is fine. We can discuss all that at family dinner, he suggested. Your mother's planning it for Sunday. Despite my reservations, I agreed to attend. Perhaps a face-to-face conversation was what we needed to break through the cycle of hurt and defensiveness. When Sunday arrived, I drove to my parents' house alone, having asked Marcus to give me space to handle this myself. My stomach churned with anxiety as I parked in the familiar driveway. Inside, the scene was artificially normal. My mother's signature pot roast in the oven, the dining room table set with the good china, everyone dressed as if for a special occasion. Kevin and Megan were already there, both eyeing me warily as I entered. Rachel. My mother embraced me as if nothing had happened. You look thin. Have you been eating properly? Dinner began with stilted small talk, work updates, neighborhood news, comments about the unseasonably warm weather. No one mentioned the Bahamas trip or the tension that hung palpably in the air. Finally, as my mother served dessert, my father cleared his throat. We're all here because we need to address what happened at Christmas and move forward as a family. I waited, hoping against hope for a genuine conversation about the deeper issues. Rachel, he continued, we understand you were hurt by not being included in the vacation plans. We should have handled it differently, and we're sorry for that. My mother nodded earnestly. We never meant to hurt you, honey. We just didn't think you'd be able to take time off work, and we didn't want you to feel bad about missing out. It was the same surface-level explanation they'd given at Christmas. Nothing had changed. That's not good enough, I said quietly. What do you mean, not good enough? Kevin interjected. They said they're sorry. What more do you want? I want you all to understand that this isn't just about the vacation. It's about years of being treated like the family, eh? It's about the fact that I've given and given while you've all taken and taken. That's not true, Megan protested. We're family. We help each other. When have any of you helped me? I challenged. When have you sacrificed for me the way I've sacrificed for all of you? The silence was deafening. Let me be specific, I continued, pulling out my phone where I'd compiled notes. Kevin, in the past 5 years, you've borrowed over $40,000 from me without repaying a cent. Megan, I've covered your rent 6 times and paid for 2 separate college programs you dropped out of. Mom and Dad, I've contributed to your household expenses repeatedly when you've drained your accounts helping these two. My family exchanged uncomfortable glances. Now, let me ask again. When have any of you helped me? We've given you plenty, my mother insisted. We helped with your college tuition. You contributed $5,000 to my tuition. I corrected her. I worked through college and took out loans for the rest. Meanwhile, you paid Kevin's tuition in full, and you're still paying Megan's student loans. That's different, my father argued. They needed more help than you did. You've always been so capable. So, I'm punished for being responsible? For working hard? For making good choices? Nobody's punishing you, Kevin scoffed. You're just better with money than we are. And that makes it okay to treat me like your personal bank? The conversation was deteriorating quickly, with everyone talking over each other, denying my perspective, minimizing my feelings. I've made a decision, I announced, cutting through the chaos. I'm no longer providing financial support to any of you. The room went suddenly, completely silent. What do you mean? Kevin asked, his voice tight. I mean exactly what I said. No more loans. No more paying bills. No more financial bailouts of any kind. You can't be serious, Megan said, her eyes wide with alarm. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. My mother's hand fluttered to her throat. But what about family helping family? What about being there for each other? I'm still happy to be there emotionally, to spend time together, to build a healthier relationship. But the Bank of Rachel is permanently closed. But my rent is due next week, Kevin blurted out. I was counting on you. Of course he was. You'll need to figure it out yourself, I said calmly. Just like you figured out how to fund a Bahamas vacation. The mood shifted instantly from disbelief to panic. My financial support, which they had taken for granted for so long, was suddenly in jeopardy. And with it, their comfortable lives built on my sacrifices. You're being selfish, my father accused, anger replacing his earlier conciliatory tone. No, Dad. For the first time in my life, I'm refusing to be selfless to the point of self-harm. There's a difference. Is this because of Marcus? My mother demanded. Has he turned you against your family? The suggestion that I couldn't make my own decisions was infuriating. This has nothing to do with Marcus and everything to do with how you've all treated me. He simply helped me see what I should have recognized years ago, that this isn't a healthy family dynamic. So you're choosing him over us, Megan said bitterly. I'm choosing myself, I corrected her. I'm choosing not to be used anymore. As the reality of my decisions sank in, the conversation devolved further. Kevin accused me of being heartless. Megan cried about potentially losing her apartment. My mother invoked family loyalty and tradition. My father threatened that I would regret cutting ties with family. I'm not cutting ties, I clarified. I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. But they couldn't, or wouldn't, understand the distinction. In their minds, my role was fixed. I was the provider, the supporter, the one who sacrificed. Any deviation from that role was a betrayal of family itself. After an hour of circular arguments and escalating emotions, I stood to leave. I love you all, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it despite everything. But I can't continue in this pattern. It's not healthy for any of us. If you walk out that door, my father warned, don't expect things to go back to normal when you come to your senses. That's exactly what I'm hoping for, Dad, I replied. Because normal is the problem. As I drove home, my phone exploded with messages. My mother claiming I'd given her an anxiety attack, Kevin calling me selfish, Megan saying I was dead to her. The vitriol was painful, but also revealing. Their reactions confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. Their love was conditional, dependent on what I could provide rather than who I was. The next few weeks brought an expansion of the battlefield. Extended family members called to talk sense into me. Aunt Susan insisted I was tearing the family apart over money. Uncle Paul suggested I was being brainwashed by that boyfriend of yours. Only cousin Jessica remained supportive, calling to say, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I wish I had your courage. The pressure was intense, but I held firm. With each attempt to manipulate me back into my old role, my resolve strengthened. The family I had longed for, one based on mutual respect and genuine care, clearly didn't exist. And no amount of self-sacrifice on my part would create it. As spring progressed, the direct attacks gave way to more subtle manipulation. My mother sent photos of family gatherings I hadn't been invited to, with captions like, missing our complete family. Kevin forwarded job rejections with notes like, guess I'll be homeless soon, hope you're happy. Megan posted cryptic social media updates about finding out who your real friends are in hard times. Each attempt to make me feel guilty reinforced that I'd made the right decision. They still didn't understand or care about the real issue. They just wanted the financial support to resume. In therapy, Dr. Barrett helped me process the ongoing fallout. What you're experiencing is an extinction burst, she explained. When a behavior that was previously rewarded suddenly stops being rewarded, the behavior often intensifies before it finally stops. They're pulling out all the stops to get you to return to your old role. Will it ever end? I asked, exhausted by the constant emotional assault. Yes, she assured me. When they truly understand that the old pattern is gone for good, they'll either adapt to the new reality or they'll distance themselves. And if they choose distance, then that's valuable information about the true nature of your relationship. Her words were hard to hear, but undeniably true. If my family couldn't love me without financial strings attached, perhaps what we had wasn't really love at all. As the confrontation phase extended into early summer, I focused on strengthening my chosen family, friends who valued me for myself, not what I could provide. Marcus and I moved forward with wedding plans, deciding on a small ceremony with people who truly supported our relationship. The lines had been drawn. I had taken my stand. But the most difficult test of my resolve, and the true breaking point that would determine the future of my family relationships, was yet to come. The breaking point came in late June, nearly 6 months after the Christmas revelation. I was at work when my mother called, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "Rachel, I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "I miss you. We all do. Can we please try to move past this?" Her tone seemed sincere, lacking the accusatory edge of previous conversations. For a moment, hope flickered within me. Perhaps they were finally beginning to understand. "I miss you too, Mom," I admitted. But moving forward requires more than just pretending nothing happened. I know," she said quickly. "We made mistakes. The vacation, the way we've relied on you financially, it wasn't fair." It was the most acknowledgement I'd received from any family member. My throat tightened with emotion. "That means a lot to hear, Mom. So, you'll come to Sunday dinner this weekend? Everyone will be there, and we can start fresh." I hesitated, wary but wanting to believe in the possibility of change. "I'll think about it, okay? I need to check with Marcus about our plans." "Marcus," she repeated, her voice cooling slightly. "You know, Rachel, I sometimes wonder if he's the one who put all these ideas in your head about us using you." And there it was, the manipulation hiding beneath the apparent conciliation. The flickering hope extinguished. "Mom, I'm a 30-year-old woman with my own mind. My decisions are my own." "Of course, honey," she backpedaled, but the damage was done. "Just think about Sunday, okay? We miss you." After hanging up, I sat at my desk, a strange calm settling over me. That call had clarified something essential. The surface might change, but the underlying pattern remained. They wanted the old Rachel back, the one who would give endlessly without questioning the imbalance. That evening, I created a spreadsheet, methodically documenting every dollar I'd given my family over the years. I included dates, amounts, stated purposes, and whether the money had been repaid. Almost never. The final tally was staggering: $73,428.19 over 8 years. What could that money have bought? A down payment on a house, a significant portion of my student loans, financial security during economic uncertainty. But the financial cost, while substantial, wasn't the most important calculation. The next day, I created a different kind of spreadsheet, an emotional balance sheet. On one side, I listed what I'd given my family emotionally: constant support, priority in my schedule, emotional labor, unconditional acceptance of their choices. On the other side, I listed what I'd received: conditional love, criticism disguised as concern, dismissal of my feelings, betrayal of trust. The imbalance was even more striking than the financial one. Marcus found me staring at these spreadsheets late that night. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked gently. "Quantifying relationships can be painful." "I need to see it clearly," I explained. "I need to understand exactly what I've been sacrificing and what I've gotten in return." "And what will you do with that information?" I took a deep breath. "Make a final decision about my boundaries going forward." Over the next few days, I consulted with 3 people: Dr. Barrett, my oldest friend Stephanie, and a financial advisor named Alyssa Wright. Each provided perspective on a different aspect of my situation. Dr. Barrett helped me articulate what healthy family relationships should look like and acknowledge that mine fell far short of that standard. Stephanie, who had known me since college, reminded me of specific instances when my family had taken advantage of my generosity while criticizing my choices. Alyssa outlined the financial implications of continuing to support my family versus focusing on my own financial health and future with Marcus. By Friday, I had made my decision. I would not attend Sunday dinner. Instead, I would draw a clear, firm line that could not be crossed or manipulated. I spent Saturday drafting an email to my entire family, parents, siblings, and the extended family members who had involved themselves in the situation. I revised it multiple times, removing emotional language in favor of clear, direct statements. Marcus read the final version, suggesting only a few small changes for clarity. On Sunday morning, at the exact time I would have been driving to my parents' house, I sent the email. Subject: my decision regarding our family relationship to my family, after careful consideration. I am writing to clearly communicate my decision regarding our relationship moving forward. I will no longer provide financial support of any kind to any family member. This includes but is not limited to loans, gifts, bill payments, co-signing, and emergency assistance. This decision is final and non-negotiable. I have documented $73,428. 19 in financial support provided over the past 8 years, most of which was given with the understanding it would be repaid. I am formally forgiving these debts, as I recognize they will likely never be repaid. However, this forgiveness comes with the understanding that no future financial requests will be considered. I am open to building a new relationship based on mutual respect and honest communication. However, this cannot happen until everyone acknowledges the patterns that led to this point. I will not pretend that the Christmas incident was an isolated event rather than part of a long-standing dynamic. For the immediate future, I am establishing the following boundaries. I will not attend family gatherings where my feelings and perspective are dismissed. I will not engage in conversations that attempt to guilt or manipulate me. I will not respond to messages that blame Marcus or others for my decisions. I will block anyone who continues to send manipulative or abusive communications. I love you all and hope that we can eventually build healthier relationships. But that cannot happen without significant changes in how we interact. Rachel. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone exploded with notifications, texts, calls, voicemails, emails. I silenced it and placed it in a drawer, giving myself permission not to engage with their immediate reactions. Later that evening, when I finally checked the responses, they fell into predictable patterns. My father was coldly furious, writing, "I never thought I'd see the day when my daughter would put money above family. Your mother is devastated." Kevin alternated between rage and panic. "You selfish bitch. What am I supposed to do about rent now?" Followed by, "Please, Rachel, I'm desperate. Just this one last time." Megan went straight for emotional manipulation. "I can't believe you're doing this to us. Mom hasn't stopped crying. Is this really the person you want to be?" Extended family members expressed shock and disapproval, with Aunt Patty writing, "Family helps family. Period. This isn't how you were raised." But there were also unexpected responses. Uncle Bill, my father's brother, wrote, "I understand more than you might think. It took courage to set these boundaries. Give everyone time to adjust." And most surprisingly, my cousin Taylor sent a private message, "I've watched how they've treated you for years. It wasn't right. I admire you for standing up for yourself." The most telling reaction came the next day when Kevin showed up unannounced at my apartment, pounding on the door and shouting. Marcus moved to answer it, but I stopped him. "Let me handle this." Through the door, I called, "Kevin, I'm not opening the door while you're behaving this way. If you want to talk calmly, text me, and we can arrange a meeting in a public place." "You can't hide from family," he shouted. "You think you're so much better than us with your fancy job and perfect boyfriend, but you're nothing without us." His words were painful, but also clarifying. This wasn't about love or genuine connection. It was about control and access to resources. "I'm calling building security," I informed him calmly. "Please leave before they arrive." He did, but not before sliding a note under the door with just 5 words, "You'll regret this decision forever." I picked up the note, feeling strangely calm. "Actually," I said to the empty hallway, "I think this is the first decision I won't regret." The next weeks brought escalating attempts to break my resolve. My mother left tearful voicemails about how I was killing her with worry. My father sent formal emails about my family obligations. Megan created social media posts clearly directed at me, lamenting how some people forget where they came from. Each attempt reinforced that I'd made the right decision. They still didn't understand, or chose not to understand, the fundamental issue. They saw me as a resource to be managed, not a person with valid feelings and boundaries. With the help of my financial advisor, I systematically removed my financial connections to my family. I closed joint accounts, removed my name from cosign loans that had been paid off, and canceled automatic payments I'd set up for various family expenses. It was like untangling a complex web, one that had been woven over years of enmeshment. Each strand removed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The family pressure peaked when my parents involved our family's longtime pastor, Reverend Thomas, who called to express concern about my hardened heart. "Rachel," he said gravely, "forgiveness is at the core of family life." "I have forgiven," I replied. "But forgiveness doesn't mean allowing the same patterns to continue. It doesn't mean being a doormat. Your family is struggling without your support," he pressed. "Surely as a Christian, you feel called to help those in need." "Reverend Thomas," I said carefully, "would you advise an alcoholic's family to keep providing alcohol? Because that's essentially what you're asking me to do, continue enabling behaviors that harm everyone involved, including those engaging in them." He had no response to that. By August, the intensity of the backlash began to wane. The daily barrage of messages slowed to occasional attempts. My mother's tone shifted from accusatory to resigned, my father's from commanding to distant. Kevin and Megan, forced to find other solutions to their financial problems, communicated less frequently. The most telling sign came when Megan posted on Instagram about her new job at Starbucks with a caption, "Sometimes you have to do what you have to do." It was the first job she'd held for more than a month in years. Kevin, according to mutual friends, had moved to a smaller apartment and taken on a roommate. My parents, facing the reality of no longer having my financial cushion for their retirement, had consulted with a financial advisor of their own. They were adapting, just as Dr. Barrett had predicted they might. Without access to my resources, they were finding ways to support themselves. The irony wasn't lost on me. My selfish decision had actually forced them into greater self-sufficiency and responsibility. As summer turned to fall, I experienced something unexpected, relief mixed with genuine grief. Relief that the constant drain on my finances and emotions had stopped. Grief for the family I had always wanted but never truly had. Through therapy, I came to understand that this grief wasn't new. It had been there all along, buried beneath layers of hope and denial. I wasn't mourning a lost relationship so much as acknowledging a truth I'd long tried to ignore, that the loving, supportive family I'd tried so hard to create through sacrifice and compromise had existed only in my imagination. By October, nearly a year after the Christmas that changed everything, Marcus and I had saved enough for a modest down payment on a condo. Without the constant financial demands from my family, our savings had grown surprisingly quickly. The day we signed the mortgage papers, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment and freedom. This milestone, which had seemed perpetually out of reach while I was supporting my family, had become attainable in less than a year of financial independence. That evening, as we toasted our new home with champagne, Marcus asked gently, "Any regrets?" I considered the question seriously. "About the condo?" "Absolutely none." "About your family," he clarified. I looked around at the small but charming space that was truly ours, bought with money we had earned and saved, representing a future we were building together. "My only regret," I said finally, "is that I didn't set these boundaries years ago." As I prepared for my first holiday season without contact with my immediate family, I felt both trepidation and a quiet confidence. The path I had chosen wasn't easy, but it was right for me. And for the first time in my adult life, that was the priority that mattered most. One year after the Christmas that changed everything, I stood in the kitchen of the condo Marcus and I had purchased, arranging cookies on a platter for our holiday gathering. The guest list included friends from work, Marcus's brother and sister-in-law, my cousin Jessica and her husband, and a few neighbors we'd become close to. "Need any help?" Marcus asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "I think I've got it under control." I smiled, leaning back against him. "Hard to believe it's been a year." "You've come so far," he murmured, kissing my temple. "I'm proud of you." His words warmed me because they were true. The journey from last Christmas to this one had been challenging, but transformative. With the help of therapy, support of friends, and the clarity that comes from distance, I had rebuilt my life around healthier relationships and stronger boundaries. Dr. Barrett had been instrumental in my healing process. Our weekly sessions had evolved from crisis management to deeper work on my patterns and beliefs. I learned to recognize and challenge the guilty thoughts that arose whenever I prioritized my own needs. I practiced saying no without following it with justifications or apologies. "Your mental health has improved dramatically," she noted during our session earlier that week. "When we started, you were having anxiety attacks and sleeping poorly. Now you seem centered and calm." She was right. The constant knot of tension I'd carried in my chest for years had dissolved. I slept through the night more often than not. The persistent sense of inadequacy, of never doing enough, never giving enough, had faded. Professionally, I'd thrived as well. Without the emotional drain of family drama, I had more energy and focus for my work. I'd been promoted to senior marketing director, with a team of 8 reporting to me. The boundaries I practiced in my personal life translated to better management skills. I delegated effectively instead of taking everything on myself, and I advocated for my team's needs rather than just accommodating every client demand. Our new holiday traditions had evolved naturally. Instead of the formal, tension-filled gathering at my parents' house, we hosted a relaxed open house where friends could drop in throughout the day. Instead of expensive gifts designed to impress, we organized a light-hearted white elephant exchange. Instead of my mother's rigid menu, we created a potluck where everyone brought a dish that represented their own family traditions. "The ham smells amazing," I told Marcus, checking the oven. "Your grandmother's recipe was definitely the right choice." "She'd be thrilled to know we're using it," he said. "She always said food is how you build new families." New families. The phrase captured exactly what I'd been creating over the past year, a chosen family built on mutual respect and genuine care rather than obligation and guilt. I still received occasional updates about my biological family through extended relatives and social media. The updates confirmed what I'd hoped might happen, that my withdrawal of financial support would ultimately benefit everyone. Kevin, faced with the reality of supporting himself completely, had taken a steady job at an insurance company rather than chasing get-rich-quick schemes. According to my cousin Taylor, he'd been there 6 months and was doing well. "He actually seems less stressed," Taylor reported during a coffee date. "He's not constantly scrambling for money or pitching new business ideas. He just goes to work, collects his paycheck, and pays his bills like a regular adult." Megan had surprised everyone by not only keeping her Starbucks job but also returning to community college with a clear plan. She was studying hospitality management and paying for it herself through a combination of work, scholarships, and carefully managed student loans. "She seems more confident," Jessica told me. "Like she's actually proud of what she's accomplishing instead of just drifting." My parents had downsized to a smaller house, acknowledging that their previous lifestyle had been financially unsustainable without my contributions. My father had delayed retirement by a few years, and my mother had taken on additional tutoring work to supplement their income. These changes hadn't been easy for any of them, but they were necessary adjustments to reality. My financial support had been a crutch that prevented them from developing their own strength and resilience. Removing it had been painful, but ultimately beneficial. Our relationship remained distant, but was slowly evolving. After months of manipulative messages and guilt trips, my mother had finally sent an email that showed a glimmer of understanding. "I've been thinking about what you said regarding patterns in our family. While I don't agree with how you've handled things, I can acknowledge that we relied on you too heavily. Your father and I are working with a financial advisor now to plan for our retirement without burdening you or your siblings. I hope someday we can find a way to be family again without the financial aspect. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of the deeper emotional issues, but it was a start, an admission that the previous dynamic had been inappropriate and unsustainable. I responded with a brief but cordial email, thanking her for reaching out and expressing hope for continued growth and understanding. We weren't ready for in-person meetings or holiday gatherings, but the door was slightly open for a new type of relationship in the future. Kevin and Megan remained more resistant to change. Kevin had sent a Christmas card with a stiff note saying he was doing fine without any help. Thanks. His pride clearly still wounded. Megan followed me on Instagram from a new account but never commented or messaged directly. These small gestures revealed the painful truth about family healing. It happens at different rates for different people, and sometimes complete reconciliation is impossible. I had made peace with that reality, understanding that I could only control my own actions and responses, not anyone else's journey. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. Our first guests had arrived. As the condo filled with friends and chosen family, the contrast with last Christmas couldn't have been more striking. Instead of walking on eggshells, I moved freely through my own space. Instead of manufacturing cheer to cover underlying tension, genuine laughter filled the rooms. Instead of measuring my worth by what I provided, I was valued simply for being myself. After dinner, as we gathered in the living room for dessert, Jessica raised her glass. I'd like to propose a toast to Rachel and Marcus for creating this beautiful new tradition and for showing all of us what it means to build a life on your own terms. Glasses clinked as warm eyes met mine around the room. In that moment, surrounded by people who truly saw and appreciated me, I felt a profound sense of homecoming, not to a physical place, but to myself. Later, after the last guest had departed and Marcus and I were cleaning up, he asked, "What are you thinking about?" "You've got that reflective look." I considered the question as I rinsed a plate. I'm thinking about how sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most growth. A year ago, I was devastated about losing my family. Now I understand that I didn't lose them. I found myself. He nodded, understanding as always. And in finding yourself, you created space for relationships that actually nurture you instead of depleting you.
Exactly.
I placed the last dish in the dishwasher and turned to embrace him. I learned that protecting your peace isn't selfish. It's necessary. That real love doesn't demand the sacrifice of your self-worth. That sometimes the strongest family bonds are the ones we choose, not the ones we're born into. As we turned off the lights and prepared for bed, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy, and it wasn't completely finished. There would always be complicated feelings about my family of origin, occasional pangs of loss for what might have been. But I had discovered a profound truth through this painful process, that the capacity to set boundaries, to require respect, to value myself, these weren't acts of selfishness, but of self-preservation. And in preserving myself, I had created space for authentic connections based on mutual care rather than obligation or utility. The Christmas lights twinkled outside our window as I drifted toward sleep, Marcus's steady breathing beside me. I was no longer the family ATM, the reliable fixer, the endless giver. I was simply Rachel, whole, worthy, and finally at home in her own life. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your peace and self-worth? Did it lead to unexpected growth or healing? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength through life's challenges. Remember, sometimes the hardest choices become our greatest blessings. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and may you find the courage to create the life and relationships you truly deserve.